Welcome to the Outside the Business Boxes podcast, where we're talking about how to ignite your business today for the future using systems for everything you do in your business to make your life, your employees' lives, and your customers' lives easier for you to ultimately enjoy your business and, of course, make more money. I'm your host, Chad Murray. We are so honored today, and I'm so excited to have Retired Admiral John Boomer Stufflebeem on my podcast. I got to know him through the PBCA, the Professional Business Coaches Alliance, that I've been affiliated with since I became a business coach. They certified me, trained me, and I'll tell you, his organization merged with ours. He ended up going through our training on how to be a business coach, and through the conferences and stuff, I've gotten to know him a little bit and had some fun talking to him. And I asked him to be on my podcast, and he jumped to it and said yes. So what we're going to learn today is leadership, some of his stories. He's got some good war stories we're going to hear. I tried to relate it into the chimney certification of how we can get our people that are maybe not on book smarts to how we can help out getting them certified. But let me tell you, don't miss this episode. It was a great talk with the great Boomer Stufflefield. So here we go. With no further ado. Okay, everybody. Thank you. We're now getting here with Boomer, John Boomer Stufflebeem. I'm going to read you a little bit about him for his introduction here. He's a former professional football player, retired U.S. Navy Admiral with more than 30 years experience of elite teamwork, executive positions, and coaching executives. He has led hundreds of U.S. military leaders, coaching up to and during every major conflict since the Cold War. He was a career warrior as an aircraft carrier fighter pilot, where he developed specific expertise in leading people during times of extreme stress, including his time in the White House as a presidential aide. Guys, listen to this. Carrying the nuclear football. Okay, I have a special guest. Hey, Boomer.
Hey, Chad. How you doing? It's good to be here.
You have no idea how tickled I am to have your presence on my little podcast. I really appreciate you coming on here. And so he's on vacation, so he took the time. So I want to really thank you. He's with his grandkids out of the Outer Banks, and he's taking the time to be with us today. So what's so interesting, we got to know each other just very vaguely, through our new organizations. I've been in there a while, but through the coaching organization, the PBCA. And what is the organization that was previously called that you were in?
So I was asked to join as an associate, Diversified Professional Coaching, LLC, based out of Orlando, Florida. So that has brought me formally into the world and through the door of PBCA.
Yeah, and it's a great organization, and so we've shared some couple of events together, and hopefully get to know each other now that we're face to face, and we can grow. At least I can grow with some guiding leadership from you. And so tell me, so I read a little thing about your bio, and so what's your little elevator pitch about you, I guess?
The one that I like the best is the one that I got from somebody whom I admired and followed out of the military, who became a very successful coach of his own. And he said, you have to think about coaching like putting seasoning on a good steak. People know what they want. They are already chewing on it. They have success in what they like. But what makes it just better?
Right.
So what makes us just better? Somebody who can tease it out of us. And I think that's really what coaching is all about. And that's what I find rewarding in it.
Yeah. No, it's so... I think that's the one message I think with a lot of people who have never been coached. Really, what do we do? And it's the potential. How we both learned in the military. How to bring out the potential in everybody and make them go above the potential they ever thought they could have. And in business is no different. That's one of the reasons why I think I've excelled. Being in the Army National Guard, then in the Marine Corps. I did both. I know I've got that core values, and I brought all that to my business. and I hold everybody accountable to that. And then I also inspired them, to do that. So, let's get into you. I don't want to talk about me. That's enough about me on this podcast. I want people to hear your stories of leadership and stuff. And so, when we talk about this, I heard you told a story, at the last deal about how you're in the little car, and jumping out of the thing, and a little bit of leadership there, and maybe, I don't know, maybe in that one it was a lesson of not being a leader with that story. Tell that story a little bit. That's an interesting story.
Okay. Well, this goes back to my time when I was a three-star in the Navy, and I was put in charge of a NATO deployment into Pakistan after a devastating earthquake that had occurred there, and this is in, I think it was in '05. In any case, a few years back. So while I was there, and I had to bring a small staff and go into Islamabad, Pakistan, and then set up a forward headquarters towards more of unfortunately, where the bad guys are in what's called the Federally Administrated Tribal Area of Pakistan. And in the process of that, there happened to be an afternoon when I was asked to come up and visit with the military commander of a district. His headquarters were in a town called Abbottabad, which became well known to some people in America because that's where we ultimately found Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
Well, this was before that. I had a security team of special operators assigned to me to make sure that I was going to be okay in this environment because I had two responsibilities. I had a NATO responsibility for all the forces that were brought in to help deal with this natural disaster of this giant earthquake. But at the same time, I had a national hat where I had to keep my eyes and ears open about what was occurring with the Taliban that had been supporting Osama bin Laden up until this point. Well, we got into a small SUV from Islamabad. We got it from the embassy to drive into Abbottabad, several hour drive. And it was a small little Suzuki SUV. And what we really wanted to do, as the security people briefed me up, was we got to be incognito. We're going to be in civilian clothes. We're going to try hard not to look like gringos, if you want to call us that, in that part of the world. And there were four of them and just myself. And so I'm in the back passenger side seat, and there are two protectors up front, and one beside me and one in the back was looking out the back of this little thing.
So it's a tight ride. It's a tight ride.
Huh?
It's a very tight ride.
So and none of us are small. So we just about, I think, took out the undercarriage of this thing several times as we bottomed out over unproven terrain there in the area.
Right.
Drove up to Abbottabad. I met with the general who wanted to meet with me and what we were going to do up there. And at the end of that meeting, we got back into our little tin can to head back down out of this city or town through this mountainous, windy terrain back to Islamabad. Well, something had changed because when we came into town, it was kind of just, donkeys and people and nothing, I would say nothing remarkable in a third world kind of environment. Mm-hmm. But coming out of the town, the road was choked. And we found ourselves in the middle of it. We couldn't turn left, right, stop, back up, anything. We were all just being funneled on this very narrow 1.5 lane practically dirt road. After we got into it a bit, we realized what was happening. There had been a checkpoint set up, and the checkpoint, they were checking people as they would go through the cars. As we got closer, we realized we couldn't get out of where we were. We couldn't just stop, turn around, or anything else. We were just like cattle herded into this thing. So let me stop for a second and just describe who we are inside this little vehicle. So these guys tend to go by, like I do, I have a nickname, Boomer. They go by a name that doesn't imply who they are as much as it does their position. So my senior protector was, who was a senior chief, but he was Bravo 1. Bravo 2 was the driver. Bravo 3 sat next to me, and Bravo 4 was behind me. And these are all special operators who know how to deal with themselves and take care of themselves. And when one leader falls by the wayside. The next one knows exactly who
Yep.
picks up the mantle, and off they go. My job was to go have this meeting to do stuff on our level. Their job was to get me safely there and safely back. Well, now we recognized as we were getting closer inside this herd of cars being necked down to this checkpoint, this is the Taliban. These guys got the black hats, they're all dusty, they're armed to the teeth, and they had a little pickup truck that they bolted an anti-aircraft gun into the back of, what they call a technical, and that was actually what was blocking the road. And they would, when a car would get up to their vehicle, they would surround this thing. There was about a dozen of them, I think, as I recall, and they all had AK-47s, and they'd point them into the windows. And they were just extorting people for whatever it is they could find. If they were looking for food or money or water, that's what they were up to. I mean, and that's kind of their MO in that part of the world. Well, we, of course, were very nervous about, geez, what are they going to do with us? Because we're not locals.
Yeah.
They're going to figure out very quickly that we're not from this part of town. And what are they going to get from us? Nothing. I mean, we got some water, but that's about it. But they could get a lot of weapons. They could get a lot of Americans to hold us hostages. We just don't know.
Yeah.
So as we got closer, inching up bumper to this, I said, well, Chief, I said, what's our plan here? And he looked at Bravo 2, who was driving, and they both kind of agreed and said, well, here's what we'll do. When the car in front of us is let go, we'll just ram into the back of that vehicle and help push it, and the two-car train will just roll through this before they can move that technical back in place to block us and stop us. I didn't really like the sound of that, but this was not my role. I mean, these are the guys that are trained into what they call the 3-meter fight, that person-on-person kind of a thing. I was working much higher altitude, bigger, wider issues. So this wasn't my lane to be a leader in whatsoever.
Yeah.
But as we saw the vehicle in front of us get stopped, and it was actually full of women, they made them all get out, and they patted them down and then searched the car. And we thought, gee, we can't let them take us out of the vehicle because then we're really in trouble. So, okay, as soon as they get back in their vehicle, and if they move the truck, we're just going to ram and go. That's what I thought I heard. Well, sure enough, as they're allowed to get back in that vehicle in front of us, they move the technical out of the way, and as we're to go, our vehicle stalls out. And now it's, the 3 or 4 tries, it's right out of a movie, if you will, to try to get this thing started again. Well, by that time, the technicals had plenty of time to get out of the way, allow that vehicle through, and then back to block our exit. We're stuck. So we get it started, we started to move, and we started to, basically burn the clutch to get out of there. And it didn't take long. They immediately surrounded us, at point blank range. I could hear the safeties clicking off of the submachine guns in the laps of the security detail. And I had a weapon too that was underneath the seat that I would pull out if necessary. And I was on the right side of the window. I'm primary right-handed. This would mean I'd be shooting offhand with the left hand, and I'd be doing it through the glass, probably against 1 or 2 people who have semi-automatic weapons. This wasn't going to go well. Plus, this giant machine gun that was in the back of this technical was a big enough caliber, it would split our vehicle in 2 if he got 1 round off.
Right.
We realized we'd been had. And the only thing that I could hear these guys, they weren't talking, but I could hear, again, the safeties were off. I could hear them double checking that they had another magazine available. And I thought to myself, I'm ready to die for things I believe in, but being inside this little sardine can at the hands of these guys is not one of them. And I thought to myself, somebody's going to have to take control of this situation. But there wasn't any time to talk it out. So I just leapt out of the vehicle by myself and walked up to who appeared to me to be the senior person of this group. Little tiny man, scruffy beard, black hat, dirty as can be. His AK-47 looked almost as big as he was. And I made what I thought was sort of a calculated error in stepping up to him. 1, because he was pointing his weapon directly at me. And 2, I towered over him, recognizing that probably wasn't giving him any confidence that he was in control of the situation. So I dropped down to 1 knee to be eye level with him, which unfortunately for me just meant he put the muzzle of his AK-47 right up against my forehead. I knew these guys were illiterate. I mean, that's the nature of that whole environment. They don't read or write, so asking for papers means nothing. And I didn't speak Pashto or any other dialect up there, and they didn't speak a word of anything other than their own dialect. And I cannot explain how or why it just happened, but I just sort of conjured this image in my head of Monty Python, and I came up with this stupid British accent, trying to explain with hand gestures and words that I'm a doctor. We're all doctors, and we're here to take care of you. You know, making stethoscope this and doing this kind of a thing. And this guy almost senses what it is I'm talking about, but I could tell he was just mystified with his blank stare. He yells at a younger of his troop to come over, who comes over in front of me, slings his weapon, raises his tunic, and he's got a terrible, terrible rash all up and down the front of his torso. And so I'm looking at it like I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm just, oh my gosh. And so I yell back at the vehicle. I said, hey, throw me something out of our first aid kit. And of course, Bravo 1 says, well, what do you want? I said, whatever you got.
Get some cream.
He flips out a tube of something and it lands in the dirt next to me, and I pick it up, and I think bacitracin, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I pretend I'm showing this guy that I'm taking the cap off, and I'm putting it on my finger, and I'm rubbing it all over my stomach, and I'm pointing it at this young guy. And the old guy looks at him, looks at the stuff, looks at the tube I had, looks back at me, snatches it out of my hand. He actually takes the cap off, puts it on his finger. He tastes it, which couldn't have been good, spits it out, recaps it, throws it at his compadre, yells at him, then looks and squints back at me again as he brings his weapon back up. And I'm thinking, it's now or never. What else to do? So I keep pleading with him about, does anybody else need help? And he just backs up. And then he slams the butt of his rifle on the hood of the car and screams something, and all the guys back away from the vehicle, and the technical cranks up. I didn't need a second invitation, so I ran as fast as I could and jumped back in the door where I was, and we peeled off as soon as that technical got out of the way. We held our breath until over a hill so that we could see we were not being chased down or fired at afterwards. And Bravo 1 turns around as we all exhale, and he said, sir, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen anybody ever do in my life. Please don't ever do that again. And I think I was shaking so bad I couldn't think of anything good to say, so I said, hey, Chief, that's okay. You got the next dirty check from now on. The point was, and we talked about this when we got back and debriefed our run up and down this highway, is anybody can be a leader anywhere, anytime. It's the person who probably has the best or clearest view. And I grew up in my military career believing in three things: simplicity, clarity, and focus. And whoever's got the most of all of that is who ought to be leading. And that's how it worked out that time for me. But the whole point of it was just, they were the leaders. They were the ones trained in this. They were the ones to do this sort of stuff. But at that moment, they didn't have it, and somebody else brought it.
Yeah, you pivoted, and it worked. You guys lived, because their plan probably would be you wouldn't be here, And so
they might have got them all, but I got to believe somebody would have got some of us.
Yeah, and so, which is great what you just said, about leaders stepping up to leaders. So with our audience as service industry people, and some starting out and some, have 50 employees, I think that's such a great thing to think about through a top level down scenario. Are you giving the people that are in your organization the ability and the chance to lead? I think that's lost in the service industry a lot, except for the people that start growing their business to that $5 to $10 million mark, because you can't do it alone. You can be a starting out technician, build your business to $1 million, and we always talk about how you kind of get stuck at the $1 million in the service industry, and then you kind of learn how to scale and systematize, but then you get to $4 or $5 million. Well, you can't do it anymore. You have to have more leaders that you've either trained, brought in, or developed to go to 10 million. And when you really hear, Admiral, retired. What do you go by? Admiral Rear Admiral Boomer, retired.
Boomer.
I know you do. I know you do. But
Titles.
but you hear him talk about, this, everybody. It's how important is it to be a leader, but then develop leaders. And I mean, that's what we love in coaching is we like developing leaders. Well, I've got business or clients that I'm using now that I'm on what we call level 2.0. Okay, I'm still developing you, but now how do we develop the people below you? Like tomorrow I have a whole management team that I'm working with from a fairly new client that I'm developing the next level down with them. And they got it right off the bat of what it is to develop people below them to scale their business. And I think when you take that, I guess, vision to your business to everyone below you, stop trying to be the top guy. Let people come to your level, and if they have to pivot or learn and do that, that's just where your business can really do it by giving them, the ability, give them that option that, hey, rise up to my level. I mean, it's okay. I want you to. I don't want to stop you. I want you to. I mean, and I think one thing I've done in my business, my service business, is, I walked away from it 7 years ago and kind of meandered around for 4 years and became a business coach. But even in that time that I developed my team and then for the next 4 years was really developing on them until I became a business coach, it was, how do I give you guys vision? And that's the problem. You don't give them vision. You give them the opportunity of vision and let them take it from there. And that is where I think a lot of people have that question of, well, how do you really train a leader? Well, you do, and by talks and stuff and by example. But I mean, am I off? What do you think about what I'm saying here?
Well, I fall right into where you're coming from. I think, first of all, there are a lot of parallels between what we all learn in the military and the processes and the techniques that we're taught. And then we just have to learn the language of how to translate that into our world beyond that. There are two hardest truths about leadership. Letting those above you do your job, and then you letting those below do theirs.
Yeah.
And so if you look at yourself in those three echelons, and who are the ones above you? Well, it's your customers.
Yep.
And you have some peers, but you certainly have people who are answering to you. How easy is it to just say, you know what, instead of explaining this or showing this, I'll just do it myself? That doesn't develop anybody.
Nope.
What about the individual, a technician who comes back in from a job site and is describing this particular problem with this particular customer, or maybe it's a system that person's dealing with? Who knows more about that situation than that technician who just came back? So who wouldn't be the best person to say, well, what do you think we ought to do about it?
Right.
And that is what I view as sort of the second best lesson of leadership, is learning to ask the right questions. Because if you can ask the right questions and you can get the answers that you would like to hear or you want to hear, or more importantly, that your customers would be happy to hear the resolution to, that allows them to come up with fixing it. So, third lesson to take away that I always try to take to heart was, I'll tell you what the what is. Your job is to figure out the how. And I'm going to keep asking questions until I'm satisfied that you know how you're going to take care of this. And when people realize that they become responsible for not only their unit of work or their slice of your particular company, but when they realize that they can make input into other and maybe even larger projects, that develops leadership.
Yeah, it's such a great point because, I mean, half my customers, or not quite, but close, are all in the chimney fireplace industry. And in our industry, this probably could go to say with HVAC and plumbers too, there's a certification that you should or have to get to really start advancing in our business. Well, the problem with the certifications are they teach you a lot of statistics, they teach you a lot of this, and they really become a badge on the wall, right? It's what you do with that, outside of that, to grow and learn. Like, I'll tell you, I'm a master certified chimney professional, and I can tell you right now, there are guys that have gotten their certifications in the last year that probably know it better than me. because I know the parameters and I know what to do. I can't quote as much code as I probably would like, but I know how to solve the customer's issue properly. And I know how to teach my people how to solve the issue properly. And so I've gone 26 years in business to only having 2 certified people in my business, me and my general manager. Now, that's not the norm. I don't think. Most people want to go get their educators or salespeople at least trained and certified, which we are doing now. So I'm putting it out there, all you shitty people listening. We are doing that, and they are on a path to getting their certifications. But I don't want to say it's not necessary, because that's not the right word. But it's not an absolute. You can train people to do the job right and ask the whys, and then you can develop their train of thought into the solution. I think that's exactly what you're saying in my different way of saying it. So let's say they come back, there's an issue. They come to ask my general manager, how do I fix this? The answer shouldn't be, this is how you fix it. The answer first should be, why did this happen? And where are you at to why you. And I don't mean don't know it to be mean. It's like, why don't you know this? Where are we at? And then they explain, and there's a lot of weird things that we see. So we get the weirdness, and we're like, okay. So the training back to them is, well, what do you think we should do? Or what do you know that we've done before? And then let them talk it out, not just, well, do this. Because what happens is they end up just asking that question again and again and again. And so we actually developed what's called the decision tree. It's you can Google it online and stuff, but my general manager used to be, I couldn't get a hold of him. This was like 5 or 6 years ago, just always on the phone with everybody. And there just seemed to be this disconnect of developing everybody below us. And so, and that was, he molded and got rid of a lot of people from when I'd say in 2 years, we had our core group of guys we always had, and then all the helpers got shifted. He found his own people to work with him for everybody, which is fine. It is what it was. But everybody, as they got promoted, was always, he was the encyclopedia. And I could never get a hold of him. And so I read this book, Fierce Conversation. I can't remember the author right now, but it's called With Susan something. And it's a really long book, and it really you really got to be focused. But I got this one snippet out of there, was the decision tree. And what it does is it gives clarity when someone calls up to what type of question it is and how I'm going to answer it for you. So there's the leaf, there's the branch, there's the trunk, and there's the root. What kind of decision what kind of question are you asking me before I do it? So the leaf is just, this, I don't need to know it. You pretty much say goodbye, this, hang up. You do it nice, but I'm just saying that's the quick version. Then there's the branch. The branch decision is, I needed to know it, but you could have just emailed me or texted me, and you could have told me next week, doesn't matter. Still kind of the hang up, go do, you did right, thanks. Then there's the trunk. The trunk is, I need help, but maybe not right now, but I can give you the decision maybe later. Give me the deal, I'll get back to you with the answer. And then there's the root, and everybody thinks their question's a root. I need to know now, I have to have the answer, I can't move on until I find out. So my general manager was always getting root, and then in his mind, and they were. And what it does is when you start asking them, when they call up to ask a question, well, what kind of decision is this? And they always at first say root. And then you get to define it as you listen, well, let me hear the question. And you go, well, no, that is a branch. You know the decision, tell me, they will tell them the decision, what they think they should do. And they go, that's branch. I just need to know that, but you can email it to me tomorrow or tonight. It doesn't matter. So now what it does, not only does it start defining the questions coming in, but it gives them accountability of how they can make that decision later on. So when you get to leaves, it took John 3 weeks to almost make everything a root or a branch. A leaf. And the calls, I can get a hold of them now. It was great. And it's a hard little process to work because the management has to work it. They have to work it. And so, but once they do start working it, they start getting clarity on how to work their problems out in the field. And so it's a neat little leadership tool for everybody. And I've never told anybody about it on the podcast, so you kind of got that, So let's keep going. Let's talk about. So one of the things that I believe you're known for, but I don't know if I read it on here, is something about 9/11. So tell me about your 9/11 experience.
Yeah. Well, at 9/11, I worked in the Pentagon. I was a brand new one-star in the Navy, and the job that I had was to be the director of the National Military Command Center, and that encompassed about 7 different responsibilities. After we were hit, I was physically not in the building when it got hit. I arrived there later in the afternoon. Secretary Rumsfeld, who was Secretary of Defense at the time, and I had developed a bit of a rapport for about not quite the year we'd worked together before. He pulled me out of my assignment and said, I want you to put together a special activities group. You go find the people that you need. You got carte blanche to pull from wherever you can. Bring them together. And you need to do this very quickly, because in 3 days, I want you to come back to me and give options that I can take to the president of how we're going to respond to this. So I went back to my office, just about threw up, thinking what I'm going to have to deal with here. And there were a few people whom I knew I could count on. They were my go-to leaders. I'm going to digress for a second, because what you were just previously talking about and what I was dealing with at this moment really came into focus. Let's see how many of you who are parents heard this from your parents and you just hated it. The worst question in the history of communications. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Because there's only one answer to that one, and invariably it doesn't satisfy anybody.
Yeah.
But a better one that I learned along the way is, do you have enough? And that allows an opening for somebody who may not be as comfortable or stuck with a problem or has an issue, doesn't know what to do about it, can at least have that opening. But what it also did for me, as a principal leader, I'll say, is I realized that what I needed to do is one of the most important things I needed to do was to create resources for people who didn't have what they needed. And so therefore I became more of a resource allocator, which includes getting information. So here I put together this special activities group, and we had a wide variety of expertise and experience, not just military. We had some civilian, we had some foreigners who were not American naturally. And we started to put together ideas, and they were all over the map. And what I said was, okay, I'll be your chief. What I need you Indians to do is to just throw ideas against the wall and then write them down, and let's put them on paper so I can put them in a notebook and take up to brief the secretary. And you've got basically 36 hours, ready, set, go. I'll be out there. Call me when you need me. Call me when you have questions. Call me if you want to run something past me. I'll be available to you. And so we worked this as a process over that time. We came up with 5 what we call courses of actions, or COAs in a military acronym. And I got briefed on them to my comfort level. As Albert Einstein was fond to say, if you cannot explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Yeah.
And so the term of art that came into my group was, he's going to boomerize it, which means that he'll be able to simply explain it.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got to understand it. So we worked for the last few hours of time available to boomerize these 5 COAs. I took them upstairs to the Secretary of Defense. At the time, at that moment, everybody was busy. The chairman couldn't be bothered, and vice chairman, even the director of the Joint Staff said, just go in and you got to deal with this one. So it's just one-on-one. So he never sat down, by the way. He always stood up and had standing tables in his office. So he stands there and he looks at 1 or 2 and 3, and then 4, and then 5. And then he tore one out. And he says, we're not going to take that one forward. And then he looked at another one and then went back through the second time, asked me a few rudimentary questions, and then tore out a second one. Now he's got 3 COAs left in his book. He goes over to his table, picks up what we call the red phone, red switch. He picks it up at the other end. He goes, "Yeah, I've got something for you. I need to come over." I didn't realize at the time, but as I peeked over his shoulder, the button was the Vice President, Dick Cheney. And they were very close friends, and had worked together, so I wasn't surprised about that. He hangs up, turns around, looks at me, and I hadn't been out of my office with this group for 4 days almost.
Yeah.
So I didn't really look my best. He goes, "You got a clean uniform?" "Of course I do, sir." He goes, "Go get it. Meet me back here in 15 minutes. So I ran back to where my cubicle was and got changed and ran back to his office. And then he says, "Let's go." We went outside down to motor vehicles waiting for us, and they took us over to the White House into this situation room. And so in the situation room is this, quote unquote, long green table. At the head of it would be whoever the principal is. And in this case, it was Dr. Rice, Dr. Condi Rice, the National Security Advisor. And then to her left was Rumsfeld. I sat next to Rumsfeld. Sat next to me was General Hugh Shelton, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. On the other side was the Vice President, the Deputy National Security Advisor, a guy named Doug Feith, and I forgot what his role was at the time. And then I'm not sure if I even paid attention who else might have been near that table. So Dr. Rice says, "Well, what are we here for?" He said, "We got some ideas for the boss to take a look at." So she opens up the notebook and she flips through 1, through 2, through 3, and she looks at Cheney and said, "Have you run these down?" And he said, "Yes, I have." And she says, "Well, what do you think?" And she's looking at everybody around the table like, "What do you guys think?" Cheney says, "I think we're ready." And so it's like, "Okay, we're ready." So everybody stands up. Vice President and Rice walk out. And so I back up waiting to get, okay, we're going to get in our vehicles and go back to the Pentagon. No. We stood around talking for a few minutes and then watched President Bush. So he goes now, takes the center seat, and now everybody on the other side slides down one to accommodate the Vice President and Dr. Rice. But in this time, instead of sitting at the seat next to Rumsfeld, Rumsfeld pushes me up and says, "You're the briefer, so you get to answer his questions." So I'm sitting now to the president's left elbow with Rumsfeld sitting on this side, and Bush opens up the notebook, looks at it, and then he looks around and goes, "Well, what are we here for, men?" Rumsfeld looks at me and says, "You're on." So I started to briefly overview the 3 COAs that we had, and again, what I tried to do even in talking about it would be simple, clear, and very focused. And at the end of that, and it was only like 15 minutes, at the end of that, he rips one out of the binder, and he goes, he turns to Rumsfeld and says, "How fast can you get this to Tommy?" Who was General Tommy Franks. And then he turns it to General Shelton and says, "I will have it there in a matter of minutes." That was the formulation of what we were going to do to respond to what had just happened to us at 9/11. I couldn't have in my wildest nightmares imagined that's where I would be at that moment on that day. But the rest became history. And what it proved was not anything that I had to bring to the table, other than some comfortability of not being intimidated by senior people. It was the fact that I had a group of people that I counted on who could think clearly under pressure, who may not have had all the answers, but they knew how to ask all the questions to ensure that the resources could be made available if that was going to be the way we would go.
That's so awesome. That wasn't even the story I was going for. that was awesome. So to kind of back up, had you ever met President Bush, or
Truth in Advertising, and you hit upon it in your introduction for me. Years earlier, when I was a commander in the Navy, I was selected to be the naval aide to the president. So I was the first person who came in at inauguration under President Bush, H.W. Bush, whom we would call Bush 41.
Yeah.
And I got to know his whole family by working in the White House and being close to him for those 2 years. So I knew George W. as W., which is what the whole rest of the family called him. And at that moment, when I was working for his dad, W, he was just the general manager of the baseball team down in Texas.
Yeah, I'm aware.
An oil guy.
Yeah.
And the loudest of all the siblings. So when when the inauguration occurred years later, and now I'm working in the Pentagon on the Joint Staff, I was the one who briefed W on the football, what it meant, what he had to do, that sort of a thing, and he remembered me. So he was nice to me, kidded me, and then the rest is So I wasn't intimidated the fact that he was the president, but I also didn't expect him to go light on me for any particular reason.
Right.
Nor did I expect him to have any particular, trust and confidence in what I'm doing. The trust and confidence that I brought to that table came from the people I was leading.
And that right there, I think that's big in the service industry. Because I think a lot when I take on a new company at first, and even through guiding them, through the year I've coached them. I mean, I've got like 7 or 8 clients that have been with me now. We're well into year 2, so we're not. I don't generally just take them on for 3 months and then we're done. It's a continuing relationship. It's the trust in the people below you is hard in the service industry for people as they're building their business. Because there's always that first step of stepping out of a truck into the 30,000 view of actually working on the business. But then once you get there, like we said earlier, how do you grow that business? And you sitting there confident of what you came up with your 5 steps, whether they not be the right ones, you were in front of the president and everybody else confident that I got something for us to take on because of what we just did in 4 days in locked rooms, right? And I think when you bring it down to the service level, if you train your people right and you give them the vision, you can build a service business or any business really, knowing that you're doing it right for them, that they'll do it right for you. And I think that's lost a lot. I really do. I mean, I've never really thought. You've given me some clarity on how to even help some people in the future here of building that trust, not just your trust, their trust. It goes both ways. And so a lot of times I hear when I take someone else, what I was trying to say in the beginning, is I'll hear when I'm in an initial interview with a client. They're talking about, I really want to grow my business and all my stupid employees. And they kind of have that mentality a little bit. And of course I cringe like, ugh. I hate hearing that, but I know where they come from because I've built a business too. And it's like, so when you get into talking to them about their stupid employees, they're not stupid. They're at all. They might have, when they say things like that, have one bad apple that they're triggering and putting everybody in that label, and that's not really the case with most companies. And so when we start guiding them and getting them to the leadership thing, it really does start changing businesses. But so who are you working with now, type of businesses that you deal with your leadership? And what are some of your cool key points that gets through to people?
I've got a very wide variety of clients, and I'll say that coaching is not the main bit. When I retired from the military, and for anybody with a military background, they'll get this instantly, but even people in business start to recognize this. Whatever industry we're in, it's a pyramid. And you're in this pyramid until you get to the apex, whatever it is, your age or your economic situation, whatever it is. There's an apex. And when you get to that apex, there aren't any options left. You're coming up and out of that. Well, what's next? Serial entrepreneurs say, well, I'm just going to create a new business. For me coming out of the military, I didn't have that mindset. So I thought, geez, what am I going to do? And somebody pointed out to me that where I was at the bottom of an inverted apex. I just had to decide how wide did I want those filters open to decide what kind of customers and clients would I take on and what could I possibly do for them. So it's been a very wide variety of things, which is what I found out really trips my trigger. I really like a variety of difficult challenges, and if I can do them well, not only does it give me a sense of reward, but it helps other people too. So I have been as wide left, I'll say, as I spent 8 years doing consulting for Lockheed Martin on stealth fighter jets. On the other end of it, my coach from my NFL days, when I was a rookie coach, when I was a rookie player, my rookie coach was Bill Belichick, and we became lifelong friends. So that when I was retiring from the military at that apex, he called me and said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, I got to figure it out." He goes, "Okay, good. I got a job for you in the meantime." So I work for Bill Belichick. I do crisis management and even media training for his players and his staff. And then that has spun out as he spins out coaches into other arenas. So I went with Billy O'Brien, who left the Patriots to go to Penn State and then to the Houston Texans. I went with Matt Patricia to the Detroit Lions, which is my old team. I've been with Mike Vrabel with Tennessee. Let's see, there's about 5 or 6 right now. I'm just stumbling on the names. Too many knocks in the head, I think. Anyway, I'll have 5 to 6 NFL clubs that I'm doing work for. And then pick the stuff that's in between. Where I found my passion is that I found such strong similarities between the elite military and the elite end of the football realm. I just started pulling things together. And the nexus of that for me was traumatic brain injury. The concussion realities of however you get them.
Yeah.
And then I found out that beyond the actual physical damage that can occur, there's also emotional trauma that can be as extreme as physical. And where does it take us? It takes us on a spectrum of mental illness, which may be mild cognitive disorder. It could get more severe and then become Alzheimer's. Ultimately, where it can go is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, which is 100% fatal at this point.
Yeah.
Damage to the brain that eventually starts to kill itself, and then the organs follow. So I am involved in now a number of business developments, one of which is a company out of Denver that senior scientist is a long career neurosurgeon who has discovered that the brain knows how to protect itself from a concussion, which is like the holy grail in my book.
Yeah.
It's one thing to figure out what it is. It's the next thing to figure out how to treat it. But if you can prevent it, Yahtzee.
Yeah.
So I'm getting involved in that. I'm getting involved with what is now known as the world's leading expert on social media digital marketing with a firm, it's called Rocketer out of London, England. It's very high end, but they have figured out the real science. So there's a word that I wanted to come back to that it reminds me of in what you were just talking about earlier. When people go to get certifications and professional qualifications, like I just have to become a coach, a certified professional business coach from within the PBCA or Professional Business Coach Alliance, that's a science.
Yeah.
So when our technicians go out and get qualified and then certified, that's the science. But the real success in business is the art work.
Yep.
And it's the art of knowing that when a customer calls complaining about a job that a technician has done, not necessarily the technician's fault, it might have been the expectations of the client.
Yeah.
And therefore the customer, who's always right, gets a leader who backs up his technician and says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you great customer service and we're going to do this or do that, but you've just backed up your person. That person says, geez, he's backing me to the hill. And that's a hell of a great leader.
Yeah.
And he's given him inspiration to continue on and do better. So that's part of a lot of what I'm starting to instill in some of these companies that I'm working with. And then the latest one is not far from where I am. I'm currently on the outer banks of the North Carolina, looking across the Albemarle Sound at the inner banks of North Carolina. And I'm working with a group of former football guys that I have known over the years. We're looking to put together there's a name for it, I just forgot it off the top of my head, but let's just call it a holding company to develop an old piece of farmland in the inner banks, and in the center of that create a head, neck, and spine center of excellence to treat former NFL players and former special operators near Fort Bragg, because there's a huge concentration of both here in North Carolina.
Yeah.
If I could do that, I'd probably move there because give me a chance to get a nice house on the water, maybe get a boat and put in front of the house.
Yeah.
There's just all kinds of goodness there.
That sounds like a good future plan right there.
Yeah.
So, wow. I mean, I could talk to you forever. So, I mean, I'm going to try to stay focused here to our little niche here stuff. And so, what? So you're a fighter pilot. We know that, and so obviously the discipline of the training with that is pretty big. So I guess what can you do as a leadership guy that's going to be putting a bunch of guys through some training that because let me go back up. In the chimney world, there is a pretty difficult certifications that we have to take, and generally who we're dealing with are people that may have a college degree, but let's just face it, typically they don't. So we're dealing with high school guys, in their 20s, possibly early 30s, that are gonna maybe go a step above what they've ever thought they could do by trying to pass a test, and go from there. So what would be some guidance to some people that are trying to show people that we can do this? I'm going to give you this opportunity, and I'm going to help you guide through it. But how would you go about trying to get their mindset to do it right?
So I've done this. I can't think of how many times, but I'll just say more times than I probably can remember all the instances along my career in the military. There is no better teacher than experience, and it applies in the leadership realm as well. And so with any particular group, especially if it's an apprentice group, and I had plenty of those, like in a fighter squadron, as the commanding officer of a fighter squadron, I had an executive officer, my number two, who would fleet up behind me. And then I had about 4 or 5 department heads, or I guess you would call them managers, and then they would have all the apprentices working for them. And what we would do is, I never was one to kind of get into this, let's go do off-site bonding things that are fun and that sort of stuff. And I think there's a value in it for some people somehow, somewhere. But what I would do is say, let's deal with a real issue, whatever it is. And I had plenty to choose from where I was and what I was doing. And now let's put somebody in charge of that. Somebody who is an apprentice who is starting to show some promise and is ready to become a journeyman. Let's give him a journeyman's task and let him organize other journeymen to get it done.
Right.
And in that, he would learn firsthand of the experience. And again, no better experience than making a mistake. And so we say, let's go out and do something in a place where it's not going to make that big of a deal, or we won't let it go so far. And in the military, you can never let it go so far that somebody gets hurt or worse.
Right.
But the rule of thumb was we want to practice all of our bleeding here in training so that we don't do any of it out there on the battlefield.
Right.
We used that same thing in the NFL when I got a chance to play in the NFL. And I used it all throughout my whole military career. And I still offer that advice today. Put people in situations where they can make a mistake. Give them the encouragement to fail. In other words, don't let them fear it.
Yeah.
Just be looking over their shoulder to make sure that they don't do something that is going to cost you a heck of a lot of money or ruin an experience with a customer. But give them the chance to do that. And then when they get to a spot where they're stuck, give them the chance to work themselves out of it. If they can't quite figure it out, say, well, then go talk to somebody else who's already done something like this, if you have the time.
Yeah.
Or, if you have to, show them how to do it one time. Then back away as fast as you can. Say, this is your problem to solve. But I go back to just repeating what I said. Nothing beats experience. And no experience like failure will teach somebody a very valuable lesson. And if you can afford to do that, you will develop leaders better and faster than any other way that I've learned.
The only thing with us and failure with our industry is you really got to be treating that as a training scenario, because our failures are burning houses down. So
you know where the limits are.
Yeah, we got to make sure that. So like when we take, I think kind of going to this question, and maybe this will give you a little clarity on. And I'm asking for advice. I'm not leading you to an answer here at all. We're dealing with, let's just say, a 25-year-old guy who never went to college, wants ambition. He may have ambition, and we're trying to take him into a papered course with theory and numbers to remember, and we're trying to give him some type of scenario to pass this test and want to pass this test, and And I think a lot of people out there have had issues, business owners, of how exactly do I get these people the right way to do this without breaking the bank? And I know you may not be able to answer this, but any insight to help the industry with how are we going to help them get through this theoretical stuff, because it does go out into the field and can be issues, but in the same aspect, a lot of the test is a lot of stuff you'll never work with, but you got to find out, you got to know it. So we're trying to take people that are at this level to take a test that's at this level, and that gap is, we're all trying to fill that gap, and it's definitely not a let's go make a mistake out in the field, because we've got to we're in the kind of field where it's got to be almost mistake free, and so because we're dealing with their fireplaces and chimneys. And luckily most of our companies now, we have check balances with pitchers, and they're not a team leader out there. So we're definitely dealing with generally someone to build up that does have someone on site that can to do all this. But I'm just trying, as a leadership, I'm trying to figure out that, when it came to me when, you were doing fighter jet training and stuff like that, that obviously these guys are on a level of, they are on a high level, but there had to be some challenges that you had to go through to get yourself to another level.
So I'll get you there by just asking you some questions.
Sure.
Do you know, and I don't mean you personally, but let's just put any one of you who are a business owner or a project manager, how well do you know your people? How well do you know how they learn best?
We don't.
I don't. That out, and this is like a new hire or apprentice, or you start to find out through asking questions of them. What do they know? How do they learn? Are they fast learners? Do they see do? Can they absorb it by just reading?
Yeah.
Everybody's different.
Right.
And it begs the leader's time to invest of him or herself to learn that about how do these people learn. Most of us are see-doers.
Yeah.
And certainly young generations today, if I can see it, I can do it. But if you want me to read it or tell it to me, I'm not going to do it very well. So then that begs a question of, so what do you have to practice on? In our jet fighter world, we can't afford to go out and make mistakes in jet fighters because things just move too fast and are too expensive. So
right.
So we go into simulators and we run it all through and practice it all out on high definition simulators before we ever get into real aircraft where we really have a life and death potential there. But in your business, do you have the ability to take, some of your old fire sets that you pulled out of an old house, reconstruct it in your schoolhouse, if you want to call it that, or out back of your firm, and say, let's make this thing work? And you give that to people as a challenge to figure out, how do I do this? What is the science that I have to know? Beyond the code, what are the things I have to know? How do I have to do the math?
Yeah.
All those parts of it to make it work. And let them practice on that, and if it fails, the only thing you're going to set on fire is a picnic table sitting on it.
Right, and a lot of the companies are going to that model. We are too. We've always had that a little bit. It's just, there's just, it is. I think what you said right there is that first thing is really getting to know your people. I mean, how do they learn? I mean, it's real. When you said that, when I went to my general manager months back and I said, hey, we need to find a couple direct vent guys. That's to work on the wall button fireplaces that turn on just from a wall button. And they're really getting big in the world instead of open flame fireplaces burning wood. And so Jim Brewer, who's a nationally known, actually helps write the codes, is coming to help me. But he told me we have to, and he's funny, he kind of goes, we got to make sure we don't have any rocks show up to this. Whoever you put in here can't be a rock. So you got to make, and I'm like, I get what you're saying. The problem is sometimes, and I don't think I have stupid people work for me at all. But I know that we're kind of, and I may be the big rock at the company too, but, how do I find the people and start looking? And I think you solved a thing for me. Start getting to know them, how they might test and do some different things. Maybe not go put them through training. Maybe start giving them some minor tests and maybe some easy training stuff and see how they do. to see if they become that. If we find that book smart guy, all right, well, let's get him certified. We need one guy certified for some things. Get him to take the test. He's going to make more money. Get him to take the test. But we find out who that is by generally giving everybody some little tests, giving them some goal advancement in their career opportunities, and start seeing who's scoring what with what type of training that did they do. Was this a guy that just sat in our hour a day or week lessons going like this and then failed because he didn't do anything afterwards? Or is there a guy that was like asking questions and then goes home, studies, and then nails the test? So I see a path to figuring out who, which I don't know if anyone else had that problem, but I did.
I got a little bit beyond high school. I went to the Naval Academy, which some people would say is not a real college. It's more of a canoe university. But, we always have fun joking about who we are and what we did. But I learned there, and I learned it later when I did go to get some professional training outside the Navy, that in any organization, and this taking back to some mathematics that I swore I would never do ever again, to the bell curve. Everybody remembers the bell curve from somewheres in their school learning. And it's a reality because it occurs in every organization, even in the elite ones. I mean, I go look, and I worked with SEAL Team 6 for years. I've had a chance now to be around the World Championship NFL club six times. They got a bell curve. So they've got really strong go-to, I get it, on-field leaders. And then they've got most of the people under the bell curve that are just doing a great job, and you're just happy you got them. And then you got a few at the bottom that you're carrying along, worrying, are they going to be the ones that set my house on fire?
Right.
Well, how do I get the ones on the bottom end of that bell curve to either get up under a curve or maybe become my go-to people? How do they learn, and who are they being associated with on the job?
Right.
And when I started figuring that out, I never got to a point where there was never a bell curve, because people are just going to either pop out on top or start to drop out on the bottom as the whole organization gets better.
Yeah.
It just creates new people that get near, the new rocks get uncovered.
Yeah.
But those rocks may be the smartest guys you've got in wiring that wall switch.
Yeah.
As a for instance.
It's so true. Well, Boomer, thank you. It's been, we're at the hour time. We could go long. I can go longer. But I appreciate you so much for coming on here, and thank you so much. And I hope to again have you in the future on here again if you'll have me.
Anytime, brothers. PDCA is here to serve.
There you go. I appreciate it.